What's going on, ladies and gents? My name is Connor, aka President CM, and I am back with another 10 Points of Redemption video, the second of the day. And in this one, I am going to cover Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Now, this movie is one that I initially hated. It was released in 1996. I saw it, just recently. Actually, the first Halloween movie I saw was Halloween 5 when I was 8 years old. I ended up seeing this one much later on, and it was one that I really did not like at all. I thought I thought it was just poorly done. I thought it was a mess, which it still is a mess, but I learned to grow to love this movie, and I really learned that this movie, despite its downfalls, is actually one that's quite enjoyable, and in my opinion, the last movie that actually felt like a Halloween movie, despite some of the changes that it made. Now, you'll see throughout this list I'm going to bring up the producer's cut quite a bit, which I actually have next to me here. The only reason I don't have it up behind me right now is because it's not the central focus, but I definitely think that you should pick this up if you don't already have it with the Halloween set. I don't currently have enough money to get the Halloween set, the big box set. I do have the Blu-ray set you see behind me there, but ultimately I think that this is a good buy. It's $7.88 when I bought it on Amazon. I don't know what the price is now, but I think it's a really good buy, and I'm going to be bringing it up a few times in this video. It does have some differences from the theatrical cut of the movie that are pretty significant. There's going to be spoilers for the theatrical cut in this, not so much the producer's cut. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I will say that as far as the theatrical cut goes, I definitely think it's the one you'd want to watch out of the two if you're a true Halloween fan. The theatrical cut, as far as the ending goes, I think is much better. The rest of the movie, I think it flows better in the producer's cut, but I digress. Let's go over into the list now. The 10 Points of Redemption for Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. The first point that I have today is going to be the environment of this movie is amazing. They filmed this in Salt Lake City, Utah, like they did in Halloween 4 and Halloween 5. Ultimately, I think that's what made it feel kind of, this kind of similar, but it also was set itself apart. It was filmed in the fall, which I think gave it a great, Haddonfield vibe. I think it felt like, they were in Haddonfield still because so many of the other movies were filmed in Salt Lake City. Some of the cool shots that they had, showing the environment where you got these, the great orange leaves and orange and yellow leaves falling down. Just amazing visuals, and it really fits with the vibe of the Halloween holiday as a whole in this movie. I think it feels like it's Halloween in this movie more than it does even in the original. I think 4 probably does it best, but I think this one is probably the second best as far as feeling like the actual holiday of Halloween. Which, also kind of contributes to the creepy vibe to the movie. I think it's not, as you see on the top of this, I don't know if you can read it very well, but it's dubbed as, somebody reviewed it as the scariest Halloween of them all. To me, it's not that, but I think the atmosphere is pretty creepy, especially when you compare it to Halloween 5, which really kind of took a lot of the creepiness away from Michael Myers. It was one of the things I really didn't like, and it's not by any fault of their own. I think the mask was a big problem. I'm one of the rare people who doesn't absolutely hate the masks in 4 and 5, but I don't necessarily like them either. They're definitely my least favorite of the series besides, I really didn't like the ones in H20 and Resurrection. I thought those were just too, poppy and mainstream. I don't know if I'm alone on that. I personally did not like those masks. But ultimately, this movie, it really feels, it does have a creepy atmosphere overall. I think the night shots and scenes are set up really well and done really well to where you kind of feel that creepy vibe. The producer's cut does that really well. Also, I think they have a scene in there with Kara Strode that does really well in kind of building the creepiness of is Michael watching sort of thing. But I think that in both cuts of the movie, it's very apparent that they went for a more creepy, dark vibe for the movie, and I really like that. I really like the fact that they did that overall. And something else that the movie gets often criticized for is how the characters are in this movie. To me, not all the characters are awful. I think the character of Tim Strode was pretty bad to me. Some people really like Tim Strode. I just think the there's one line that really kills him for me, that really, really makes me hate it, and it's the I think it's cool. That scene from the movie, it's like really just throws me off. Like, I really don't like the character, but there are characters that I really like in this movie. I really like the character of Kara Strode. I think she, as far as acting wise, I think she does one of the better performances of the movie. Obviously, besides Donald Pleasence's Dr. Loomis, who his involvement is very limited in the theatrical cut of this movie. I think personally that that the producer's cut does a lot better than the theatrical cut does as far as his involvement. But I think overall, even though he was limited, I think he did well for what we saw, and honestly was probably the best performance of the movie. Which, rest in peace, Donald Pleasance, obviously his last Halloween film, which is very unfortunate. But I think it doesn't stop at Kara Strode. At Marianne Hagen's performance as her, I think, was very good, but it doesn't stop there. To me, Kim Darby as Deborah Strode, I really liked her. I thought she had a good mom vibe about her. It was kind of strange for me because I actually am a huge fan of the movie Better Off Dead, which she's in. Is a hilarious comedy movie directed by Savage Steve Holland. But I think she did a very good job in this movie overall. I mean, her acting wasn't just the best, but I think she was very motherly. I think she did a good job at that kind of, caring, warm mom type. She kind of reminds me of she kind of has a more like a grandma vibe to me, but that's only because my grandparents have shorter hair, and my mom actually has longer hair, so that's just me. But I think as a mom vibe overall, I think she fits very well into this movie. And the dad in this movie, John Strode, what a dick, right? We just love to hate that guy. I love hating him. I love how much of an asshole he is because I know what's coming for him. Watching him explode in the basement scene is just amazing. I love that. I love the fact that, that he finally gets what's coming to him, because we really, honestly, I think I love to hate him. I want to hate this guy. I want to see him in the movie because I want to hate him. And he's just such a dick, he's just such an asshole that I love to see him on screen. I want to see what he's going to do next. I think that was really cool. And although the producer's cut, I think, has a lot more character revealing moments for everybody, I think that in this movie, in the theatrical cut of this, those actors out of everybody, I think, did very well for themselves, ultimately. And it was a bit of a different performance for some of the characters. As far as the parental characters in this movie, they were almost a lot more involved than some of the parents were. In the other movies, you see them a little bit more. They actually, bite the bullet. They actually die, which I think was kind of cool that they did that differently. A lot of times parents are just kind of irrelevant. They're, they don't end up having a bearing on the story, or they just end up dying off screen in some cases. But I like the fact that they did something different with that. And another thing I like that they did very different in this movie is the score, which is my number 4 point of why this movie is actually pretty good. Was the score of this movie was fantastic. Personally, I prefer the producer's cut. I think that doing the rock kind of vibe to the movie really dates it for me. I think that really fits in with 90s horror overall, but ultimately I think that changing the score was pretty good for the movie. It gave it a different kind of atmosphere. Between the rock and the hums that they did for the whole Cult of Thorn thing, it was very different, but it still felt like a Halloween movie, and it was pretty refreshing and creepy at certain points, but ultimately I think the producer's cut does have an edge in that. I will say, though, I did like the different vibe of that in the movie. But my number 5 point is actually some of the cool subtleties they did and some of the callbacks to the old movies. One of the subtleties that I like is there's a scene where Marianne Hagen, as Kara, is walking down the hallway all slow, and behind her on a coat rack, you see the hat and coat from the Man in Black, which I thought was really cool that they just kind of threw that in there. And there's a couple other ones that are pretty hard for me to catch, but I've seen on IMDb. They have like a trivia, which is pretty cool, and I've seen people point it out on Killer Flicks as well. definitely recommend you check out any post about Halloween 6 on Killer Flicks, because people are so conflicted about the movie that it's really cool to see the differing opinions. But back to the callbacks in the movie. Beth, actually, I believe it was Beth that was stabbed to death in the same room as Michael's sister by Michael, which was really cool. And I like the fact that they're living in the Myers house, which actually brings me to my next point, point number 6, which is that they brought back something resembling the actual Myers house from the first movie. One of my biggest problems with H5 was the Myers house. Michael Myers, they established it from the beginning that Michael did not live, Michael's house was not a giant Victorian, exaggerated, killer Halloween house. It was just a normal, average, everyday house, which I really liked about it. It was just your average house in, your average neighborhood. And I really like the fact that they actually brought that back in this movie, because the Myers house in H5 was ridiculous. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but it's one of my biggest gripes about H5 overall was the Myers house. But like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm going to move on to point number 7, which, despite the differences in this movie, it still felt like a Halloween movie. And in my opinion, it's the last sequel that actually did feel like a Halloween movie. You had H20, which could have had a Halloween vibe, but they went the route of trying to rip off Scream, especially as far as the score goes. They went with the big Hollywood orchestral, score, which I did not like at all. I hated that score. Resurrection, we're not going to talk about. It does not have a Halloween vibe at all. I would like to erase it from my mind. It was a complete waste of time. But ultimately, I think this is the last one that truly felt like it belonged in the series, despite the differences that they had, despite the directions that they took some of the characters and they took the story in. I felt like this still felt like a Halloween movie overall. And like I said, it's the last one that does that, which I think really helps you like the movie a lot more, because we haven't seen one again. And hopefully the 2018 movie will do that again, will feel like a Halloween movie, but we'll have to see. Ultimately, though, I think that's one of the strongest points of this movie, is that it's the last one that really feels like it belongs in the franchise, with the original groups of movies, of course. Now, I will move on to number 8 after that. I don't want to spend too much time on that. And this is one I don't want to spend too much time on either, because it actually really upsets me, is the character of Jamie Lloyd was recast in this movie, but luckily we don't see a lot of her. I love Danielle Harris as Jamie Lloyd. I saw this movie. I saw H5 when I was like 8 or 9. So obviously, I had the biggest crush on her then. But I also related to the character because every time I heard about a horror movie, there was like a hot girl, and that was the trope that I heard of as a kid. There's a hot girl and there's a killer after her. But this one had a kid, and I thought that was really cool. And I thought Danielle Harris brought so much to that character and had so much connection and heart to that character that it was the biggest mistake in the world that this movie could have done to not follow her, to not continue the story through her. She was a character that everybody loved, and it's my biggest problem with H6, with this movie, is that they took it in a completely different direction and didn't, run the story through Jamie Lloyd. But luckily, because they recast that character, I didn't want to see a lot of her, and I didn't end up seeing a lot of her. She was not in the movie for very long, and I'm pretty glad. Not anything against J.C. Brandy. I thought she did a decent job as Jamie Lloyd, but to me, Jamie Lloyd is Danielle Harris, and Danielle Harris is Jamie Lloyd, and I don't want to see anybody else play that character. I wanted to see that character do so much more, but because J.C. Brandy did come in and play the part, sorry, J.C. Brandy, if you ever do end up seeing this, but I was glad that she was not in the movie for very long. And at least the kill that they had with the character was cool, which is actually going to lead me to my next point. Point number 9 is that Michael is fucking brutal in this movie, and everything he does, I pretty much love. As far as his kills go and his movements and brutality, now I said with Jamie's kill, it's brutal, it's different, it's something you haven't seen in a Halloween movie before, and it's something you don't expect from the character of Michael Myers, which I really like that direction they took him in. Fucking John Strode explodes, and that's all I have to say for that part. The spike through the head I thought was brutal. I thought it was a great kill. Despite the fact that it was kind of strange that there were just spikes across the wall, I think it's, if you're going to put spikes on your wall, that's the perfect thing to do with them. And you know, I like the, you know, the kills of Beth and Tim, you know, where he just very simple, you know, slitting the throat, but with Beth, you know, he just stabs repeatedly. He's just relentless with his stabbing. I really like the fact that they did that, and you know, snapping heads off, and I really like everything they did with that movie. And one that, you know, people are probably screaming at their screens right now. You didn't mention my favorite, you know, moment where Michael is brutal. Hasn't he mentioned it? Well, I haven't mentioned it because it's my number 10 point of why this movie's actually awesome. It's the Doctor Massacre Scene. Holy shit, guys. If you haven't seen this movie, I recommend you see it just because of that, and especially the theatrical cut, because it's not in the producer's cut. What an amazing scene. In my opinion, that is my Michael Myers. That is what I want my Michael Myers to be. I want my Michael Myers to be a brutal character who just, he has no regard for human life. He's just stabbing in every direction. He's doing everything, you know, he can to make sure everybody in that room ends up in a pile of their own blood. And I love it. I love the fact that they took Michael in that direction. It's shot beautifully. I like that's an effective way. In my last 10 Points of Redemption video on Rob Zombie's 31, I talk about a scene with a strobe light and how the effect is very disorienting, and you can't understand what's happening. That was the wrong way to do a strobe light effect, and this was the right way to do it. You know, it was still disorienting, it was still throwing you off, but you knew what was happening, and you loved what was happening, because anybody who likes the Michael Myers character knows that they want to see Michael just go off, especially after the last two movies where he was really just a zombie. And you know, he showed some emotion in H5, but people really didn't like that. But I think that this saved the character ultimately, because, you know, it's something, he's actually being brutal now. He's showing his anger. He's showing that he's pissed off, and he's dangerous when he's pissed off. And that was a perfect direction to take Michael in, especially after the last movie. And what they did with the story in this, it was the only thing to do for the Michael Myers character. And that concludes my 10 points of redemption for this movie. Like I said, I really didn't like this movie when I first watched it, and in my opinion, I think it's one of the weaker ones of the original franchise, but it's not at the bottom of my list. I think that it's much better than H5 in my opinion. I think the ending of H5 is probably my biggest problem with it, along with the Myers house and you know, some of the goofy things they did throughout. This movie took itself generally pretty seriously, and although it's a product of the time and it does kind of show, I think ultimately, you know, if you didn't like this movie and you watched this video and you thought some of my points were valid, I hope you'll give it another shot. I hope you'll go back and watch it. I hope you'll go back and see if you do notice these things, or if you do end up enjoying the movie a little bit better. Ultimately, that's my goal with these videos. I want to make sure that everybody, you know, sees my perspective on this, and also I really hope that you go back and watch these movies, because I hate to see people hate a movie that maybe doesn't deserve all the hate that it gets. And in my opinion, Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers is exactly that. Despite the kind of stupid direction they took it with the Cult of Thorn, I think what they did in this movie, it was a shame that the director didn't really give a shit about it. It was a shame that the studio seemingly really didn't give a shit about it either, and you know, they didn't give fans what they wanted. But ultimately, I think for what we were given, it could have been a lot worse, and I think it was done pretty well. That being said, guys, that's going to be the end of this video. I want to say thank you again to everybody on Killer Flicks who initiated me into doing this channel. I'm going to keep putting out videos like this. I'm going to keep doing things like this. Comment down below what you want to see next from me in this series. Like I said, this series is going to be horror only, but I will review any style of movie, any genre of movie. As long as I'm able to see that movie, I will review it. I will do my best. Like I said in my last video, I'm actually working on another 10 Points of Redemption video that you'll see in the future for Scream 3, and that comes from Dylan Bean, who has been very, very respectful and kind to me, and very cool about this channel. I'm going to link his channel down below, along with Lee from Drum Dums, who is also very, very cool in helping me and instrumental in helping me build this channel. And finally have the guts to do this. They both have great content, so I highly recommend you check them out. I'm going to link them down in the description below. And like I said, guys, comment down below, give me a like, give me a subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. This is President CM signing out once again, and I hope to see you again soon.